The scent of gardenias and freshly polished wood hung heavy in the air, a sweetness so thick it felt like a physical layer on my skin. I smoothed the rough cotton fabric of my sari, the pale blue one, with the small, almost invisible stain near the hem, and wished, not for the first time, that I hadn't come. My palms were damp, not from the humidity, but from the knot of nerves that had been tightening in my stomach since we left our small, familiar house hours ago. We were standing in the foyer of a house that wasn't a house, but an estate. It was the kind of place you saw only in magazines, all soaring ceilings and silent, impeccable marble floors that echoed every hesitant footstep. The foyer alone was larger than my entire living room, and the colossal crystal chandelier above me seemed to hold all the light, trapping it in thousands of tiny, glittering prisms. My son, Aryan, stood beside me, his usual boisterous energy subdued to a nervous stiffness. He kept adjusting the collar of his suit, a suit he'd spent a month's salary on for this very meeting. I reached out a hand, just brushing his arm, a silent plea for him to relax. He squeezed my fingers quickly, a tight, reassuring pressure that did little to calm either of us. This was the day we met Ria's family. Ria, the young woman who had captured my son's heart, a dazzling corporate lawyer with a smile that could, quite literally, stop traffic. And her family. They were another world entirely. This house was the proof. The heavy, carved double doors to the main drawing room opened, and a woman appeared, Mrs. Sharma, Ria's mother. She wasn't just dressed. She was sculpted in silk and diamonds. The way she walked, a slow, deliberate glide, spoke of a lifetime spent being admired. Her smile was polite, immaculate, but her eyes, when they landed on me, did a quick, almost imperceptible sweep. They started at my sandals, moved up the faded fabric of my sari, and settled for a brief, cold moment on the single, thin gold chain around my neck. That moment, that single, clinical appraisal told me everything I needed to know. I was being weighed and found wanting. I was the poor, provincial mother of the boy who had dared to fall in love with her precious daughter, Mrs. Rao, she said, her voice smooth, low, and perfectly modulated, like the voiceover in a high-end commercial. She didn't extend her hand for a shake, simply offered a small, cool nod. Please, come in. The others are waiting. Aryan's face was flushed deep red. He saw it, too. He knew what that look meant. The air between the two mothers, the queen and the commoner, was already charged with silent conflict. I looked at the sari again. I had specifically chosen it. It was old, yes. It was simple. But it was also the sari I wore the day Aryan was born, the day I felt a strength I never knew I possessed. It was a choice, a deliberate shield. I would not pretend to be someone I wasn't, but seeing the disdain in Mrs. Sharma's eyes, a small, dark seed of doubt began to bloom in my heart. Had I underestimated the scale of the chasm between our families? Had I made things harder for my son? Inside the drawing room, the other family members were assembled. Ria's father, a large man with a booming, slightly condescending laugh, and her elder brother, who gave Aryan a handshake that was too firm, too long, like a challenge. Ria herself was the only warm spot in the room, her eyes shining with apology and love as she looked at Aryan, then at me. We sat on silk sofas that felt too grand, too fragile. Tea was served in fragile bone china cups. I kept my hands folded neatly in my lap, trying to control the slight tremor in my fingers. So Mrs. Rao, Mr. Sharma began, setting his cup down with a deliberate clink. Aryan tells us he is in finance. The word finance in his mouth sounded like a polite synonym for clerk. He works at a mid-sized investment firm, I replied, my voice steady, though perhaps a little quieter than usual. I sipped my tea. It tasted of nothing. And you, Mrs. Rao, what keeps you busy these days? Mrs. Sharma asked, leaning slightly forward, her expression a mix of detached curiosity and obligation. I looked directly into her eyes. I could have talked about the small school I helped run for children from underprivileged backgrounds, the work that was the center of my heart. But something stopped me. The disdain, the way they had already judged my son based on his salary, and me based on my clothes spurred a strange, sudden decision. A moment of calculated, dangerous clarity. Me? I smiled, a small, simple smile. Oh, I don't do much, dear. I'm just a homemaker. And occasionally, I do a little bit of gardening. Nothing too taxing, the air thickened with their collective relief, a quiet, almost inaudible sigh of confirmation. She is exactly what we thought she was, simple, poor, and unthreatening. I watched Aryan's face fall, a flicker of confusion and hurt crossing his eyes. He must have wondered why I was selling myself short. I met his gaze and gave him an almost imperceptible shake of the head. Trust me, a gardener, Mrs. Sharma repeated, a slight curl to her lip. How charmingly rustic. I simply nodded, keeping my gaze soft, my posture humble. Let them think what they wanted. Let them believe I was the naive, simple mother they expected. The meeting continued, a relentless interrogation of Aryan's salary, his future prospects, his potential to provide for their daughter. I sat there, a silent, humble prop, the perfect visual confirmation of their superiority. The truth, I knew, was a heavy sword I was keeping sheathed. The waiting had begun. Normal life set up 1001 words before the grandeur of the Sharma estate, before the cold tea and colder stares. Life had been a symphony of quiet, contented rhythm. Our home was not a mansion, but a sanctuary, a two-bedroom house nestled in a respectable, older colony, filled with the comfortable clutter of decades of living. My husband, Prakash, a man whose spirit was as steady and dependable as the monsoon, had passed away 5 years prior. His absence left a hole, a muted silence that occasionally still caught me unaware, but his presence was everywhere. It was in the faint scent of his Old Spice aftershave that lingered in his study, the careful organization of his bookshelves, and the small, slightly lopsided wooden stool he had made for me when I complained my knees hurt while weeding the garden. My life, after his passing, centered on two things: Aryan and my work. Aryan, my beautiful, earnest son. He was 28, bright and hardworking. He had his father's unwavering honesty and my quiet determination. He worked long hours, dedicated to climbing the corporate ladder not for glory, but for comfort. He wanted me to stop working, to relax, to enjoy my widowhood. But work was my anchor. I ran a small, nonprofit community school in the less affluent part of the city. We focused on providing basic literacy and vocational skills to women and children who had slipped through the cracks of the formal system. It was challenging, sometimes heartbreaking work, but it was mine. I knew every child's story, every mother's struggle. My days were filled with the scratch of chalk, the smell of freshly cooked lentil soup that we served at lunch, and the glorious, loud chorus of children reciting their tables. I had never felt wealthy, but I had always felt rich. Our evenings were sacred. Aryan and I would eat dinner, usually something simple I'd cooked, like eggplant curry and hot chapatis at the small, square dining table. We'd talk about his day, the endless politics of the investment firm, the latest antics of the children at my school. The new batch of students is struggling with basic fractions. Ma, I'd say, wiping my hands on my apron. He'd laugh. Sounds like my clients, Ma, always struggling to divide the profits. I can still hear the sound of his laughter, clear and unburdened. That was our life, predictable, warm, and grounded in a deep, shared love. We were a quiet, strong unit. We didn't need grand possessions. Our wealth was in our connection, in the knowledge that we always had each other's back. Then Ria entered our lives like a burst of sunlight. Aryan was instantly, hopelessly smitten, and I, too, loved her instantly. She was intelligent, kind, and possessed a refreshing directness. When she came to our house for the first time, she complimented the embroidery on my old curtains and sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through Prakash's old photo albums. Her long lawyer brain quiet and simply human. I just want him to be happy, Ma, I told my best friend, Meena, over the phone one afternoon, months before the meeting. And she makes him incandescently happy. But the family, dear, Meena had cautioned, her voice full of maternal apprehension. They are very high society. Be careful. These things are never just about the boy and the girl. I had waved away her worries then. Love finds a way, I believed. Now, sitting across from Mrs. Sharma, the diamond weight on her wrist catching the light like a small, blinding sun, I understood Mina's concern perfectly. The chasm between my simple life and their opulent one was vast. It was not just a gap of money. It was a gap of values, of the very fabric of existence. And I had a sinking feeling that this family was determined to use that gap to undermine my son. I had a small, private income enough to live comfortably and run my school. All thanks to Prakash's careful planning and my own modest, early investment in the stock market, a secret hobby I had developed after his passing. I could have dressed better, driven a nicer car, but I chose simplicity. I chose to pour my resources into the school. It was a choice rooted in my identity, not a necessity born of poverty. But at that meeting, I had chosen to let them see me as a poor, simple woman. I had stripped away my armor of quiet accomplishment and presented myself as a blank canvas of perceived poverty. I didn't know why, exactly. Perhaps it was the arrogance in Mrs. Sharma's eyes, a need to expose the shallowness of their judgment. Perhaps it was a protective instinct to appear small and insignificant, a mother so simple she could be dismissed, allowing the focus to remain on my son's worth. Whatever the reason, the script had been set. I was the naive, simple mother who only gardened. The engagement was announced 3 weeks later. It was a quieter affair than the Sharmas probably wanted, a concession, I suspected, made grudgingly for Ria's sake. But even at the small ceremony held at their club, a place where the waiters moved with the quiet reverence of monks, the weight of their judgment pressed down on us. I wore the same humble blue sari, carefully washed and starched, a silent rebellion against their extravagance. Prakash's thin gold chain was my only ornament. I noticed how Mrs. Sharma kept introducing me with a carefully dismissive, breezy wave of her hand. Oh, this is Aryan's mother. A very sweet lady. She keeps herself busy with her garden, you know? A true lover of nature. I would smile, a soft, self-effacing smile that confirmed their narrative. But beneath that placid exterior, I was watching. I wasn't just observing the surface tension. I was tracking the currents. The first clue that my deliberate performance had consequences far beyond simple social awkwardness came from Aryan. It was a Tuesday evening. He had come home late, his usually bright eyes shadowed with worrying. He paced our small living room while I warmed up the leftovers. The smell of turmeric and cumin was comforting, familiar, a stark contrast to the sterile, over-perfumed air of the Sharma's world. Ma, can we talk? He finally asked, his voice low. I turned from the stove, my heart already tightening. Of course, Beta. What is it? He sat down heavily on the old velvet sofa. It's about the wedding. And the house. He rubbed his temples, a gesture of deep fatigue. Ria's parents. They've been talking a lot. They keep suggesting we should live closer to them. In the city center. In a newer apartment. And they keep mentioning this house. Our house. I waited. The faint, rhythmic ticking of the wall clock was the only sound. They asked if we were planning on selling it. Ma, they said it's a bit far out, and frankly, a bit too old for a young couple starting out. Mrs. Sharma even suggested that the sale of this house could be the seed money for the down payment on a place they'd help us find. A slow, cold chill crept up my spine, chasing away the warmth of the kitchen. I sank into the chair opposite him. And what did you say, Aryan? I asked, keeping my voice level, not wanting to betray the sudden, sharp spike of anger that had hit me. This house was more than just bricks and mortar. It was my life with Prakash, the only home my son had ever known. I told them it wasn't for sale, that you loved it here. I told them this was our inheritance, our anchor. He hesitated, swallowing hard. But they kept pushing. Ma, Mr. Sharma laughed and said, no, that simple cottage. Your mother won't mind. She's too sweet and simple to care about market value. She only cares about her garden. The sting of that phrase too sweet and simple to care was surprisingly sharp. It wasn't just condescension. It was an active calculation. They were not just judging my poverty. They were planning to exploit it. My little performance was having an effect I hadn't foreseen. They truly believed I was naive and malleable, an easily dismissed figure. A poor, simple woman who wouldn't understand a legal contract or a market appraisal. Did Ria say anything? I asked. Ria. She looked uncomfortable, Ma. She tried to change the subject, but she wouldn't confront them directly. She just kept saying we'd cross that bridge later. She's under a lot of pressure. I know. They're constantly reminding her of all the sacrifices they're making to arrange this wedding. I felt a deeper sense of unease. It wasn't just the parents. It was the dynamic. Ria, who I loved, was allowing her parents' toxic narrative to color the future, and she wasn't defending the home she knew I cherished. The line between their snobbery and an active attempt at manipulation was blurring dangerously. Over the next few weeks, the small, unsettling signs multiplied. I noticed that every time I would mention the community school, just a passing comment about a child's achievement, Mrs. Sharma would interrupt, smoothly pivoting the conversation back to their charitable donations to a massive, well-publicized hospital foundation. My small, heartfelt work was constantly diminished, framed as a quaint, insignificant hobby. Then came the conversation about the dowry, though they never used that word. They called it contributions to the young couple's future security. Ria's brother, a sharp-featured man named Sanjay who worked in property development, had asked Aryan to provide a full breakdown of the assets. It's just for the prenup. Aryan, Sanjay had said casually during a dinner. Standard procedure in families like ours. We just need to know what you and your mother are bringing to the table, so we can ensure everything is legally protected for the children. The language was clinical, efficient, and utterly devoid of warmth. When Aryan later showed me the legal document, it specifically required disclosure of all fixed assets. The house, my investment portfolio, everything. I don't like this, Ma, Aryan confessed, his hands shaking slightly as he held the paper. It feels like they are making a list of everything they want to claim. I took the document from him, the crisp paper cold against my fingertips. I didn't need to read the fine print. I knew what this was. This wasn't about security. It was about acquisition. They were using the veil of legal protection to inventory my son's worth and, more alarmingly, mine. They saw me, the simple woman, and saw an easy target of valuable asset poorly managed, ripe for the taking. I sat there, looking at the formal, intimidating font of the legal document. I felt the slow, steady transformation of my protective instinct into something harder, something steely. My act of humility had been misinterpreted as weakness. It was time to show them that a simple gardener understands the difference between a seed and a weed. I folded the document carefully. Give me a few days, Beta. I need to think. Do not sign anything. Do not tell them anything more about the house or the money. Just tell them the paperwork is complicated and your mother is helping you sort through it. My son, seeing the calm certainty in my eyes, simply nodded, a sudden trust replacing his anxiety. He didn't know the extent of my gardening, but he knew I was preparing to protect him. I was moving from suspicion to strategy. The game, I realized, was now officially on. The discovery, betrayal 900 to 1,200 words, the turning point, the cold, hard moment of pure betrayal didn't come from Mrs. Sharma, but from my own son's fiancée. Ria, I had decided to investigate the asset disclosure for myself. I didn't trust Sanjay's intentions, and my instincts, honed by years of surviving the quiet deception of the world, were screaming a warning. I drove across town to the lawyer's office, a modest place run by an old acquaintance of Prakash's, a man named Mr. Verma. I didn't tell Aryan where I was going. I only told him I had a meeting for the school. Mr. Verma, a kind, bespectacled man, looked over the prenuptial agreement, his brow furrowing deeper with every page. Mrs. Rao, this is not a standard protection of assets, he said finally, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. This is a mechanism for unilateral control. Clause 4.2. They are attempting to define the family home your home as a community asset immediately upon marriage, provided its title is transferred to Aryan's name. And look at Clause 6.1, Joint Venture Agreement. My breath caught. A joint venture. What does that mean? It means the property they help Aryan buy in the city, the one they will partially finance, will actually be majority owned by their family trust, specifically controlled by Sanjay, the brother. And Clause 6.3 states that in the event of any financial distress in the first 5 years, any of Aryan's personally owned fixed assets like this house of yours must be liquidated immediately to cover the venture's losses. He paused, letting the weight of the words settle. Simply put, Mrs. Rao, they aren't looking for security for their daughter. They are looking for collateral. They see your simple, debt-free house as a valuable, unencumbered security blanket for Sanjay's risky property schemes. And they are using the pretext of this marriage to legally access it. The anger was immediate and scorching, but it was quickly replaced by a deeper, colder realization, the calculated cruelty of it all. They weren't just snobs. They were predators. I drove home slowly, the sun setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the road. I felt physically sick. The simple life I had led, the peace I had cultivated, was not just ignored, but actively seen as an opportunity for theft. But the real betrayal was yet to come. The betrayal that broke my heart was not the legal maneuvering of the parents, but the willing complicity of Ria. The next day, Ria came over, unannounced. I was in the garden, pruning my rose bushes, the smell of damp earth and crushed leaves filling the air. I still wore the simple, cotton clothes they associated with my naivete. She found me by the gazebo. She wasn't wearing her usual sharp lawyer suits, but a simple cotton kurta, an attempt, I knew, to fit in. But her eyes were calculating, not soft. Ma, I need to talk to you about the house, she said, her voice strained. Double quotes, oh, yes. I snipped a deadhead from a deep red rose. It's a lovely day for gardening, isn't it? She ignored my comment. Look, Ma, my parents are getting very stressed. They've invested so much into the wedding, and Sanjay's new project is huge. He needs to close on a major land deal very soon. I put my clippers down slowly, wiping my hands on my simple apron. I looked at her, truly looked at the woman my son loved. Ria, what does Sanjay's land deal have to do with my house? She shifted uncomfortably. Well, if you could just sign the title transfer papers to Aryan now, it would help immensely. My parents said they would give us the money for the downtown apartment sooner, and it would look good for Sanjay. It's just a formality, Ma. You'll still live here, of course, but it frees up the equity as a necessary backing for Sanjay's loan. It's all interconnected. The words tumbled out quickly, rehearsed, full of the corporate jargon she used daily. But she avoided my gaze, focusing instead on the pattern of the tiles. Ria, I said, my voice quiet, almost a whisper, but carrying the weight of a dropped stone. Do you know what clauses 4.2 and 6.3 of the prenup mean? Her head snapped up. Her eyes went wide, the mask of composed lawyer crumbling into pure, unadulterated fear. That was the confirmation. I don't know those specific numbers. Ma, my father and Sanjay handle the legalities. No, Ria, you're a corporate lawyer. You know exactly what they mean. You know that if I transfer the deed to Aryan, and if Sanjay's property scheme collapses, which Mr. Verma tells me is highly probable, my son, your future husband, is legally obligated to immediately liquidate this house, throwing his mother out to cover your brother's losses. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by a bird chirping high in the mango tree. She stood there, frozen. You saw the document, Ria. You're not naive like the simple gardener. You allowed your family to set a trap for your future husband, using his mother's home as collateral. You have done more than just stay silent. You have actively come here, this very minute, to convince the simple, poor mother to give up her only security for your brother's greed. Tears welled up in her eyes, not of repentance, but of being caught. Ma, please, it's not what you think. My father pressured me. He said if I didn't help Sanjay, he would cut off my inheritance, my practice. I stood up, closing the distance between us. The scent of earth and roses was thick around me. I didn't raise my voice. I simply spoke with the cold clarity of ultimate disappointment. No, Ria, this is exactly what I think. You saw your family's greed, and you chose the side that protected your money, not the man you claim to love. You chose to protect your inheritance over your future mother-in-law's home. That is the betrayal. I picked up my clippers and turned back to the roses, ending the conversation. She stood there for another minute, a trembling figure of ruined silk and broken promises, before turning and fleeing the garden. My heart was not broken for myself, but for Aryan. He was about to marry a woman whose love had a price tag and whose family saw him as an entry point to a hidden vault. The simple, humble act was over. The strategy had to begin now, the reaction. Action 900 to 1,200 words that night, I sat Aryan down. I didn't soften the blow. I was his mother, not a therapist. He needed the raw truth. I laid the evidence out, Mr. Verma's notes. The specific clause numbers, the timing of Sanjay's land deal, and the details of Ria's desperate plea in the garden. Aryan listened in stunned silence, his face draining of color. When I finished, he didn't weep or rage. He went terrifyingly quiet, the way his father used to when confronted with deep injustice. She asked you to sign the deed, he whispered, the realization hitting him anew. She knew what it meant. Yes, Beta. She knew. The next few hours were spent in a whirlwind of emotional fallout. He called Ria, his voice a low, unfamiliar rumble of accusation. I could hear her frantic, tearful defenses from the other side of the room. He hung up finally, his shoulders slumped. She tried to justify it. Ma said she was playing a long game, that she'd changed the clauses after we married. Lies, all lies. He looked at me, his eyes red. I love her, Ma. I really did. But I won't marry someone who sees our security as leverage for her brother's bad investments. The engagement was called off the next morning. Aryan did it cleanly, formally, sending a brief, respectful but firm email to Mr. and Mrs. Sharma, ceasing Ria, citing irreconcilable differences in their long-term vision and values. No drama, no screaming. Just the quiet, dignified act of a man protecting his own. But I knew this was not the end. The Sharmas were too powerful, too proudful, and now too financially motivated to let go quietly. They would not accept a simple email. They will retaliate. Aryan, I warned him. They will try to make you look bad. They will try to get the house anyway. They will use their influence. Then we fight, Ma. But we fight smart. This was where my planned naivete became a strategic weapon. I had allowed them to believe I was nothing more than a simple, easily intimidated gardener. Now it was time to deploy the truth. My action was not revenge. It was calculated self-defense designed to expose their true intentions to their own circle. Step 1. The counter-narrative. I called Mina and every trusted member of my small, close-knit social circle, the parents of the children at my school, the other women I worked with, the old associates of Prakash. They are saying Aryan is erratic, that he is a gold digger who broke the engagement when he realized he wouldn't get a dowry. I told them calmly, relaying the exact lies I knew the Sharmas would spread. The truth is, he broke the engagement because they were attempting to fraudulently acquire the title to our home. I need you all to simply state what you know of my family's character and financial independence when you hear their rumors. Step 2. The legal shield. I instructed Mr. Verma to immediately draft a formal legal notice. This notice was to be sent not just to the Sharma family, but also to the head of the bank handling Sanjay's property financing, and copied to Ria's law firm. The notice was concise. It detailed the specific clauses in the prenup that constituted fraudulent inducement and predatory lending against an asset, my house. It formally declared that any attempt by the Sharma family or their affiliates to use my property as collateral for Sanjay's or any other venture would be met with immediate public litigation for fraud and harassment. I enclosed a certified statement of my own net worth and income, signed and sealed by my own bank manager. This statement was the real bomb. It detailed not the simple earnings of a poor gardener, but the decades of quiet investment that Prakash and I had made. It showed that my personal, liquid assets, coupled with the value of the community school's trust funds of which I was a trustee, made me, independently, far wealthier than the Sharma's debt-ridden, asset-heavy lifestyle suggested. I also included the deed to the house, showing it was entirely debt-free, purchased 30 years ago, and legally registered only in my name, a precaution Prakash had insisted upon long ago. The message was clear. The simple, naive mother you thought you could exploit is actually a very wealthy, legally protected woman who understands high finance and has just alerted your own creditors to your fraudulent schemes. I walked to the mailbox with the heavy packets of certified mail. The envelope containing my financial declaration was addressed specifically to Mrs. Sharma. I wanted her to open it. I wanted her to feel the crushing weight of her misjudgment. The action was taken. Now we waited for the public consequence. The reaction was not a bang. It was a slow, agonizing implosion, exactly as I had planned. The silence from the Sharma house lasted 48 hours, a terrifying pause before the storm. I knew the precise moment Mrs. Sharma opened the envelope containing my certified net worth statement. It was a Saturday morning. I was in my study, going over the school's accounts, when my phone rang. It wasn't the Sharmas, but Meena, my best friend, her voice shaking with a mixture of shock and glee. Did you see the news, Amrita? Did you see? I haven't checked the social media gossip, Meena. What is it? I asked, my voice calm. Though my heart was hammering against my ribs, Mrs. Sharma threw a crystal vase at Mr. Sharma. Not figuratively, Amrita, literally. Their maid was at the market and told everyone. Apparently, she read some letter and just lost it. She was screaming about shame and misjudgment and that pauper woman who is actually a millionaire. A slow, cool satisfaction spread through me. The vase was the perfect symbol. It was their facade, their fragile, expensive veneer. Shattered by the truth, the legal notice sent to the bank and Ria's law firm worked faster and more efficiently than 1,000 confrontations ever could. The finance world operates on reputation and collateral. The bank, alerted to the potential fraud and the shaky basis of Sanjay's project, which was depending on my property as silent backing, immediately froze the land deal proceedings. Sanjay's project, already on thin ice, crumbled. The news spread through the city's elite financial circles not as a messy family drama, but as a severe professional embarrassment for the Sharmas. They had tried to exploit a perceived weakness, my poverty and simplicity, only to realize they had tried to steal from someone who was not only richer, but also much smarter about asset protection. The shame was public and relentless. Mrs. Sharma was forced to cancel a high-profile charity gala she was organizing. When she next appeared in her club, the polite, reverent distance she had always commanded had evaporated, replaced by a cold, speculative curiosity. People weren't looking at her silk and diamonds anymore. They were whispering about the attempted fraud and the sheer arrogance of underestimating the gardener. The most profound public consequence, however, played out between Ria and Aryan. Ria reached out, frantic and tearful, showing up at our gate multiple times. Aryan was firm. He refused to let her in, communicating only through text. It wasn't about the money, Ria, he wrote back after her fourth long text detailing her family's financial ruin. It was about your choice. You chose to protect your father's greed and your brother's illegal gamble over the dignity and security of my mother. You didn't just betray me. You attempted to financially harm the woman who would have been your second mother. That is a moral consequence I cannot forgive. The social consequence for Ria was the loss of respect from her peers. When the truth emerged, not the Sharma version, but the one backed by legal documents that circulated through the legal and banking community, her professional reputation was tarnished. Her colleagues at the firm didn't see a brilliant lawyer. They saw a compromised operative who was willing to use her future mother-in-law as a pawn in a scam. her promotion prospects evaporated. The cost of her silence and complicity was the loss of both love and career momentum. As for me, the quiet dignity I had maintained throughout the whole affair shielded me completely. The community that knew me, my colleagues, the parents at the school, my old friends rallied around me. We always knew Amrita had more sense in her little finger than that whole arrogant family put together, they said. I attended a small community function a week later. I wore a simple, elegant cotton sari, not the faded blue one, but a lovely emerald green. I didn't hide, and I didn't gloat. I simply existed in my truth. Several acquaintances of the Sharmas approached me, hesitant, offering clumsy apologies for having believed the initial, snobbish narrative. I only offered them a small, kind smile. It is easy to misjudge a book by its cover, I said gently, especially when the cover is designed to look humble. I had achieved justice without vengeance. I hadn't needed to scream, to accuse, or to lower myself to their level of public drama. I had simply used their own arrogance against them. I had let them believe I was the simple, naive mother, and they had walked straight into a legal and social trap. The consequence for them was the public knowledge that their wealth was hollow, their morals were corrupt, and their judgment was catastrophically poor. The real lesson was not about poverty versus wealth, but about the profound difference between class and character. They had class. I had character. And in the long run, character always wins. The resolution, healing 1,000 to 1,200 words. The resolution was not a sudden cure, but a slow, quiet convalescence. The initial storm passed, leaving behind a clear, if somewhat rearranged, landscape. The first step in healing was the silence in the house. The quiet that had previously been heavy with the hope of a wedding now settled into a comfortable peace. Aryan was heartbroken, yes, but he was also relieved. The weight of pretense and the constant pressure from the Sharmas were gone. One evening, about a month after the breakup, we were sitting in the garden, the same place where Ria had made her desperate, final appeal. The rose bushes were blooming splendidly. Ma, Aryan said, looking up at the evening sky. I feel like I grew up in the last 2 months. I was so blinded by her beauty and my ambition that I almost let them take everything we value. You learn the price of a shallow promise, Beta, I said, gently touching his arm. That is a lesson worth more than any house deed. True love does not ask you to sacrifice your family's dignity or your moral compass. We talked for hours that night, not about the Sharmas, but about us. We revisited the memory of Prakash, our silent, steady anchor. We reaffirmed our connection, the strength of our small, 2-person unit. It was a cleansing conversation, washing away the residue of manipulation and deceit. The healing for me centered on the school. I threw myself back into the work, the clear, unvarnished struggles of the children providing a profound counterpoint to the manufactured drama of the elite. The smell of chalk and children's sweat was infinitely more honest than the scent of gardenias and silk. One afternoon, I sat with a young mother, a woman named Naila, who was struggling to open her own small tailoring business. She told me about the difficulties of finding seed money, the subtle exploitation she faced from loan sharks. I listened, not as a wealthy investor, but as an empathetic woman who understood the feeling of being underestimated and preyed upon. The world will always try to take advantage of those who appear weak. Naila, I told her, my hands resting over hers. But weakness is only an appearance. True strength is in preparation and knowledge. Know your worth and never, ever sign something you do not fully understand. I used my expertise not to spite the Sharmas, but to genuinely help people like Naila. I quietly and formally established a small microloan fund through the school's nonprofit, managed entirely by Mr. Verma and a small committee. Its sole purpose was to provide debt-free, modest loans to women in our community who wanted to start small businesses. It was the best kind of revenge, a constructive, quiet act of empowerment fueled by the very assets the Sharmas had tried to steal. My gardening, I realized, was now bearing the most beautiful fruit of all. I saw Ria once more, about 6 months later. I was at the bookstore browsing the classic literature section, a place she frequented. She looked thinner, her eyes shadowed. She was alone. She approached me hesitantly. "Mrs. Rao, Ria," I replied, my voice neutral, offering no warmth but no malice either. She didn't try to apologize for the deed. Instead, she said, "My father lost almost everything in the downturn. Sanjay moved abroad. I quit the firm. I'm working pro bono for a smaller legal aid clinic now." I simply listened. She was offering me a summary of her penance. I realized, she continued, her voice breaking slightly, that I confused my parents' status with my own happiness. "I saw your life, your simple, quiet life, and I thought it was pathetic. Now I see that you were the only one who was truly free. And I was the one trapped." I nodded slowly. "The lesson had landed. Freedom, Ria," I said softly, picking up a copy of a book on philosophy, "is not about the size of your house or the depth of your bank account. It is the peace you find in your own character. I wish you that peace now." I didn't forgive her in the loud, dramatic sense. Forgiveness is often a transaction for the person seeking it. I simply granted her release. I let her go from my heart, closing the chapter entirely. She looked at me, a flicker of genuine gratitude in her eyes, and then walked away, a solitary figure finally starting her own journey toward true adulthood. I left the bookstore. The evening air cool and clean. My son was waiting for me in the car. He smiled the old, easy smile I knew. We were whole again, anchored firmly in our simple, yet incredibly wealthy life. The house was safe, the future was bright, and the greatest lesson had been learned: never underestimate the quiet wisdom of a mother who knows the value of roots. The story, as all true stories do, eventually faded into a gentle, reflective hum. I look back on that period now, the silk and the snobbery, the complex legal papers and the simple cotton sari, and I realize how little time we spend looking past the surface. I chose to appear poor and naive not because I was manipulative, but because I needed to test the true character of the family that sought to join mine. I needed to see what their values truly were when they thought the coast was clear, when they believed they had found an easy mark. And they failed that test spectacularly. Their greed, thinking they could seize a poor woman's home, was their undoing. It was a tough lesson for my son, a heartbreaking lesson about the reality of love that comes with an asterisk. But it was also a vital lesson for me that the dignity you carry is often your most potent shield. And the quiet knowledge you possess is a far sharper sword than any loud confrontation. I am still a gardener, of course. I still tend my roses and my jasmine. But now, when I kneel in the earth, I understand that true wealth is not what you accumulate, but what you protect. It is the integrity of your actions, the peace in your home, and the strong, true heart of the child you raised. And so, my dear friends, I ask you tonight, when have you chosen to reveal a hidden strength only after being dangerously underestimated? Would you have stood your ground, or would you have allowed the world to steal your peace? Share your stories with me in the comments below. Your strength helps light the way for us all. And if this story resonated with the simple, necessary wisdom of an ordinary life, please consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember the quiet power you hold.